Okay, so just very quickly, the slide or the map that we see up here is just a reminder about where the major settlements of the Israelites were once they came into the land. You can see from the green that there was a lot of land that, number one, was still inhabited by the Canaanites and other peoples, right? And that after an initial wave of success with the children of Israel coming into the land, their conquest of the land kind of faltered, right? And we looked at that last week, looking at Judges, the first chapter. And even in Joshua, right? Joshua admonished them and said, why are you so slack to go up to the land to inherit it? And so the red part here is where the extent of the Israelite settlement, primarily, right, when they first came into the land, this is kind of where they settled, right? Majority in what area? Did they settle? Now, this is a softball question. Did they settle on the plains, or did they settle in the hill country? Hill country. Excellent. Okay, people are paying attention. We're 5 minutes in. That's good. So they were really hemmed in because of a couple things, and we looked at this last week too, right? They're going to conquer the central hill country, but for whatever reason they didn't finish the task, and this is going to become a major problem for them. They're going to marry. They're going to take on a lot of the cultural aspects of the Canaanites, particularly their gods, and this obviously is going to be a source of concern and anger on God's part. He's going to look down. He's like, I've given you all of this land. I've actually helped you to prepare the land for conquest, and now you're in it, you don't want to do it. And so, the children of Israel living in the hill country are going to go through a lot of struggle and, a lot of the ups and downs. And that's really what Judges is all about, isn't it? It is this intense struggle between Israel. Israel is trying to come together as one cohesive group of people to keep their ethnic identity and their culture, and immediately they're going to be pressured by the surrounding countries or the surrounding peoples. We talked about the chariots of iron, and this is really the big reason why the children of Israel could only stay in the hill country, right up in the hill country and the mountainous areas of what's today central Israel. Chariots don't work so good up in the hills and the mountains, right? They work great on flat surfaces. So along the coastline, you're going to have these Canaanite tribes, number one, but also remember we talked about the sea peoples, and we'll look at that again. They're going to come in and they're going to conquer the coastline of what is today modern-day Israel. And they're not going to let the Jewish people or the Israelites come down to take that good farmland, right? That was really the agricultural center, particularly these valleys like the Jezreel Valley. And so what we're going to look at today is Judges 4 and 5 talk to us about a great battle between the Canaanites and the children of Israel. And it was under the direction of the prophetess Deborah and Barak. And this is going to happen up in the northern areas of Israel, what's today the Galilee, okay, the lower Galilee. And we'll look at that in a little bit. But remember, Israel, as this nation, this loose confederation of people. Remember, we're talking about tribes now. So there was no real nation of Israel at this time. There were certain tribes. Judah and Benjamin were down in the south. Up in the north was Manasseh, and Dan is going to be up there, and Asher. And Ephraim is going to be kind of up in the north central part of the land. They all had different histories, really. Okay, they had different, different issues that they were dealing with. But in times of difficulty, they always seem to kind of coalesce and come together under one ruler, and we call those people obviously the judges. Okay. Israel is not going to have, these tribes are not going to have the military sophistication or the resources to build these types of weaponry. All right, it was kind of just, kind of using an example. there's a reason why the United States has, I think it's 11 aircraft carriers, all right, the big ones. And, a country like, say, Bangladesh has 0. Well, why is that? Well, there's a lot of reasons. Number one, the United States has really an incredible amount of resources to build these super weapons, right? Bangladesh, not so much. They have other issues. And so they just didn't have the resources or the military technology at that time to really fight against the Canaanites that were down in the valley. They had chariots of iron, and they had no answer for that militarily. There actually was an answer, brothers and sisters, right? But I think their lack of faith really took over. And, they had an opportunity to do something about this very early on, and they didn't take that chance. And so, I think we talked about this, kind of kicking the can down the road, right? You want to focus on what, look, we have all this land. This is great. I can build a little farm here. It's fantastic. So you forget about the main purpose, which was to conquer this whole area and take possession of the land that had been promised to their forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And here they are in the land. God had just taken them out of, slavery 40 years before. They had wandered in the wilderness. I'm sure when they were wandering in the wilderness, this was a time period of kind of toughening them up, getting ready for this great, great purpose that they had to do, which was to go into the land and to subdue the land. All right. So this is some new information that we're going to look at to kind of bring everything together and to give us, oftentimes people say, what's your evidence that the children of Israel were in the land, right, outside of the Bible, right? And that's actually an important question. In other words, does the biblical record and the archaeological record, do they match in a case like this? Well, we do have some examples in the ancient world of Israel being mentioned. And so we're going to just take a look at one aspect of this. And this is called the Merneptah Stele. And the stele really was just kind of, a large tablet that had all kinds of writing and stuff like that, usually commemorating some kind of great deed. All right, the Egyptians loved, the pharaohs loved to, show the world how great they were, right? And they used to write all this stuff down. Now, did they take a lot of liberties? Yeah. Were they prone to hyperbole? Absolutely. Did they like to exaggerate? Yeah, sure. But we can still get a feel for what was going on during this time. So the Merneptah Stele, this commemorates events that happened around 1208 BCE, okay, 1208 BC. It is the first known record of Israel outside of the Bible. So Israel is going to be mentioned on this Egyptian stele, okay? It's called the Merneptah Stele because he was the pharaoh that participated in these wars, okay, as we're going to see. And it's really his account as written by scribes with his war against two people. Number one, first, the Libyans, okay, in relationship to Egypt. Where is Libya? Anybody? To the west, Mark. Thank you, Brother Mark Hampton, paying attention. I like it. Yes, to the west. So this is commemorating his war with the Libyans, right, who are on his west, but also his invasion and war in the land of Canaan. Okay, so this is happening in 1208 BC. All right? Merneptah is going to reign from 1213 to 1203 BC. He was the son of Ramses II, okay, of Exodus fame. And again, a lot of historians and archaeologists kind of fight over when the Exodus happened, what time period. But it's actually a pretty fascinating discussion. But in any event, I believe that Ramses II was the pharaoh. Merneptah was his son. Just a little aside. Ramses II lived to be about like 88 or something like that, or maybe even to his 90s, some records say. And he had like almost 100 children. All right? He lived so long that his first like 10 sons all died before him. And so Merneptah was like son like 12 or something like that, and he eventually is going to become the Pharaoh. He was in his 60s when he becomes Pharaoh. So think about that, right? That's how long Ramses II reigned for and how old he was. Okay? Phones away, please. Thank you. Okay? All right. Oh, okay. All right. No problem. All right, so he is going to do two things, right, that he wants to record. He's going to kind of subdue the Libyans, but also he's going to go up into the land of Canaan, right? So we can get from this that in the 1200s, Israel there is known to the Egyptians. In whatever form. We're not really told what form Israel, the Egyptians looked at Israel. But Israel as an entity, as a people now, not as a nation, as a people, are in the land during this time. And Egypt recognizes them. Okay? So what does it say? What does this stele say? All right? So, the princes are prostrate, saying peace. Not one is raising his head among the 9 bows. Now, let's just stop right here. The 9 bows, is it really a euphemism? Euphemism? Yeah. I'm probably saying it wrong, but say again? Euphemism. Thank you. For enemies. Okay, the 9 bows is just kind of this statement that the Egyptians would use to when they were talking about their enemies. Okay, so no one's raising their head. They're all prostrate before the Pharaoh. They're completely subdued, is really what they're saying. Okay. Now that Tehenu, or Libya, has come to ruin, Hatti is pacified. Okay, that's up in north. The Hatti were the Hittites. The Canaan has been plundered into every sort of woe. Ashkelon has been overcome. Giza has been captured. Yanoam is made non-existent. Israel is laid waste. His seed is not. Haru has become a widow because of Egypt. Okay, so that's interesting. So it seems, we're just kind of focusing on Canaan, his invasion of Canaan. He tells that the Canaan has been plundered in every sort of way. Okay, so do we get a little taste of hyperbole on the part of Pharaoh here? Yeah, he's really boasting about what he did. But it seems from this, and there is an archaeological record that kind of that goes along with this. Ashkelon had been captured. Gezer. Now these 3 towns or cities are along the coastline of Canaan, right? So you had to go up the coastline. But Israel is laid waste and his seed is not. Okay? So, what most likely happened in this case, this idea of "and his seed is not," we're not talking about people. Okay, in Scripture we talk about the seed, right, or the generations that would come after you. Okay, God talked about this in His covenant made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and with David, and all of those prophecies and covenants and promises were made true by Christ. But putting that aside, that's one way that a seed can be used, okay? There is another way, though, brothers and sisters, that it can be used, and it can actually refer to seed. In other words, it refers to crops, all right? And so what happened here is historians believe, and I kind of believe this too, that there was some type of invasion by the Egyptians. Oh, here we go with the text. All right? There was some type of invasion that took place, that the Egyptians came up and they looked at Israel as a threat. Now in Canaan, Egypt had a bunch of like vassal kingdoms that they controlled. And I'm guessing that once Israel came into the land during the time of the judges, they started putting pressure on a lot of these people. We know that from Joshua and Judges. And so Egypt, who kind of still controlled this area, it was concerning to them, so they went up into this area and most likely had a skirmish, some type of skirmish that involved Canaanites and the Egyptians, and Israel lost this skirmish to the point where that they most likely burned their fields. Okay? So they took away their resources in order to kind of wage war. One thing you do is you take away the ability of a people to feed themselves. So if you can't feed themselves, they're not going to be a threat to you. They're too busy looking for food if you've burned all of their crops, right? And so this is what the Egyptians did. They came up. They didn't wipe out Israel totally because we know that Israel is going to continue in the land. So you kind of have to, put your glasses on and kind of filter out a lot of kind of the hyperbole that is coming out of this. But there's a couple things I want you to take out of there. Number one, Israel is in the land, and they were some type of threat to the Egyptians and to the Canaanites that were living in the land, that were allied together. Makes perfect sense, doesn't it, from the biblical record? Of course, you have this people coming up and settling into the hill country and putting, kind of having all of these fights, particularly up in the north, with the Canaanites and other people. Okay? So Israel is laid waste, his seed is not. He has no more resources. We're not worried about Israel. They're up in the hill country. They're not going to be problems for anybody else. Remember, at this time, brothers and sisters, Egypt was like a superpower. Okay? And so they went up and they had this, they brought their army up and they had this raid and they did some destruction and they pacified the country. And that's why the stele says, what does it say? Of the Canaan has been plundered in every sort of way. Right? So all of these crops, the grains and everything, all of the resources, particularly foodstuffs, were either destroyed or taken as booty by the Egyptians. Okay? Questions, comments? We have a text here from one Jim Boyko. Reading of the stele was not done in an Egyptian accent. Okay, sounded more Birminghamish. Okay, thank you, Brother Jim. Yes.
Can I ask a quick
Absolutely,
question?
Yes.
Is it true that most of these, like Egyptian tablets or, that talked about events like these, wouldn't talk about any of the negative things that might have happened to Egypt?
Yeah, so a couple points on that. Yes, so the answer to your question, Mark, is yes, absolutely. Pharaohs aren't going to talk about wars that they lost. In other words, Ramses II, isn't going to create a stele about, the Exodus and him losing his firstborn, okay? Anything negative is not going to be commemorated. Another thing they did, Mark, too, was oftentimes when a new pharaoh came and they wanted to take credit for past events of the other pharaoh, they would scrape off the old pharaoh's name and put their name on it, or just write over whatever. So there's a lot of that, Mark, that it can be very difficult to kind of piece a lot of this together because a lot of that happened. And so you have to keep that in mind in reading a lot of this stuff, that the pharaohs are always going to boast about what they did and use hyperbole, right? And so I think that's the case there. Was Israel completely laid waste as we understand it in the modern world? No. But that's just, that's the vernacular that the pharaohs would use to show that Israel is not a threat anymore to us or to our vassals in Canaan. Any other questions or comments? All right. So if you ever get in a discussion with somebody and say, the Bible's the only place where Israel's mentioned. Say no. 208 BC, the Menephtah stele. Let me tell you what's on it. Okay. Israel is laid waste and the seed is not. Boom. In the land, 1208. Okay. All right. So let's just talk very briefly about the culture and society of Canaan. Number one, it was not a unified country. There was no the nation of Canaan or Canaan, right? Or the empire. That didn't happen. There were different groups of ethnic peoples that were kind of scattered throughout the land of Canaan. For the most part, in the Bronze Age, it was controlled by Egypt. So it wasn't independent. It did have its own culture, but it was also influenced by Egyptian culture as well. In fact, we have evidence of Egyptian towns in Canaan where they would kind of set up their own little fortress, and there would be a governor there that would kind of control the land. Anyways, this area, remember, brothers and sisters, is extremely important to trade. People are trading like crazy with each other, okay? And a lot of the major trade routes between Mesopotamia, countries like Babylon, Assyria, Elam, the Hittites, all of these trade routes go through Canaan. So it was important. So whoever controlled this area is going to control trade. And that's where the money was being made. Also, there's resources in the land of Canaan too, particularly down south. Copper mines, all right, which was very important to the making of bronze. All right. They were polytheistic. We all know what that means. That means that they worshipped a pantheon, a multitude of different gods, right? El was one, Baal, Ashtaroth, Molech, Chemosh, Dagon, and hundreds more, right? Gods of war, gods of the spring, gods of grain, gods of the sea, fertility gods and goddesses, right? Hundreds and hundreds of them. That was the way the ancient world was, okay? You didn't just believe in one God. Monotheistic, just one God, it's crazy talk, right? And this is going to persist up until, the Romans, right? When Christianity takes over the Roman Empire. Anyways, there are going to be temples in Canaan, all right? Holy places, groves. Does any of this sound familiar? Like when we look at Judges, right? And also in the Kings and Chronicles, there's always this saying, I think like for Asa, right? Asa did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, but nevertheless the high places were not taken away, right? These were ancient religious sites that predated Israel, that were sacred sites that the Canaanites had been going to thousands and thousands of years. Israel comes in and says, hey, this is great, we'll do the same thing, right? And so in some cases, these high places were still used to worship other gods. But in other cases, the high places were used, but they were used to worship Yahweh. Okay? But they were still in use. There was cultic prostitution as well, okay, in these temples. Again, something that was not uncommon in the ancient world. All right? You would go to the temple, there would be priestesses there would be priests as well. And so this was all part of their worship. This was obviously condemned by God. Animal sacrifices, without question. There is evidence, not a whole lot of evidence, but there is evidence that there was human sacrifice that goes on, particularly to Molech, and in some cases as well as to Baal as well, particularly up in the north. And so God, talks about this as well. It says, it never entered my mind, he says, to offer up children, right? Make them. I think the euphemism is they made them pass through the fire, right? It's used a couple times, and it was an abomination to God to sacrifice your children, right? And so the Phoenicians are probably some of the best known people from Canaan, right? They're up in the north, and they're going to spread their culture in their ethnicity as they go west. Remember, the Phoenicians were great sailors, and they actually sailed everywhere in the Mediterranean, up until the northern parts of Europe, most likely, down in Africa, and in some cases they may have made it all the way over to India, right? And Solomon, and I think Brother Mark brought this out, right? Solomon is going to kind of make a business deal with Hiram, and he's going to be part of their fleet that went all over the place, and I think it lists, right, in Kings, it lists all of the things that they would bring back. I think they would go on like a 2 or 3 year circuit, right, around the Mediterranean and down, get spices and all this stuff, apes and peacocks and all this stuff. Can you imagine these ships pull in, to Joppa or something? They get all of this stuff. It must have been crazy time. So But very exciting as well. The ships come in, and they've been gone for 2 or 3 years, and all of a sudden these ships are loaded with all kinds of just exotic things. Yeah. All right. So here are just some artifacts, right? Figurines, small figurines usually. Most likely these figurines would be part of like a home shrine that would be put in a room inside of your home. Excuse me. And these figurines obviously represented a certain god. All the way over to on your right is Baal, okay, a figurine of Baal. I think this is, I can't remember. These are fertility gods right here, particularly this one as well. I want to say this is Ashtaroth, but I'm not 100% sure. But anyways, here is Baal. These are both Baal right here. Baal usually had, you can see how his hand's up like that. He was like the god of thunder, okay? And so he was one of the more powerful gods. And that's really, if we look at the Old Testament, Baal worship is going to be a big problem in Israel, isn't it? It's going to be a big problem. All right. So today, for the next class, we're going to take a look at Judges 4 and 5, okay? And let's just take a look at some of the background with this. If we turn to the 4th chapter of Judges. All right, first couple verses, 4th chapter of Judges gives us some background information, right? And the children of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord when Ehud was dead, right? Ehud was the judge that saved the children of Israel from Moab. By the way, brothers and sisters, Israel is not going to be the only people that are going to come into the land of Canaan, right? There's going to be like a power vacuum during this time because of the Bronze Age collapse. Remember we talked about that? It's going to be like this power vacuum inside Canaan. And so the Moabites are going to come onto the scene as a group of people. The Edomites are going to come onto the scene as a group of people. The Amalekites too. All right? So all of these people that we are familiar with that are going to be the nemesis of the Israelites were all kind of came about this, this kind of background, this geopolitical reality is going to happen because of the Bronze Age collapse. Anyways, let's take a look at this. And the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, that reigned in Hazor, the captain of whose host was Sisera, which dwelt in Harosheth of the Gentiles. He's going to have 900 chariots of iron, right? There's that statement again. In 20 years, he mightily oppressed the children of Israel. Okay, so, they're in a very desperate state. Now, we get some insight when we look at the Song of Deborah, which, by the way, brothers and sisters, the Song of Deborah is recorded for us in Judges, the 5th chapter, is one of the oldest records of Hebrew poetry that we have. The two oldest are the song of Moses and Miriam, right? When after they crossed the Red Sea, right? In safety, there was a song of Moses and Miriam also. And so the other one is the Song of Deborah, and it's kind of a poem. It's a poem commemorating the victory that God gave them over the Canaanites. Okay? Now, let's take a look at very quickly the 5th chapter to give us some more information about what was going on. All right? Okay, in verse 6, in the days of Shamgar, the son of Anath, in the days of Jael, the highways were unoccupied, and the travelers walked through byways. The inhabitants of the villages ceased. They ceased in Israel until that I, Deborah, arose, a mother in Israel. They chose new gods. Then was war in the gates. Was there a shield or a spear seen among 40,000 in Israel? So it sounds like from what Deborah is saying in these verses is that, trade really was non-existent, right? People were afraid to go to different places because of the Canaanites, because of these people that were living down in the plain. They were afraid to leave the mountains. They didn't have any weapons at all, right? Was there a shield or spear seen among 40,000 in Israel? The answer is no. They didn't have that ability to make weapons on a large scale that the Canaanites and the sea peoples, right? Sorry about that. Now I'm going to yell on my phone. Phone. Oh, Sister Lee was waiting for that. All right. I lost my train of thought. What was I saying? So, they couldn't, they were hemmed in. They couldn't, the sea peoples and the Canaanites had control of the plains where chariots are going to work great and where all the best farmland is going to be. His general, Jabin, is going to be the king of Hazor. Hazor at this time, brothers and sisters, was a major city in Canaan. It was no joke. It was kind of, just to use an example, it's kind of like the Washington, D.C. of Canaan, or New York, So it was like a political and economic center in Canaan at this time, all right? And we know that that's the case from archaeological evidence. People have dug there and they've seen kind of the vastness of this city. But we know that they had resources because they could afford, to hire out Sisera, as we're going to see, who had 900. He really had this mercenary army. Okay? All right. Sisera is going to have a state-of-the-art army that includes 900 chariots of iron. He also had the ability to make weapons on a large scale, and we'll look at that in a second. Okay? Israel is not going to have an answer for this. Militarily, they can't compete with this at all. They can't kind of line up with their army and fight against, chariots and archers and other men with these weapons of iron. They just couldn't do it. They didn't have the resources to do it. So this is why, brothers and sisters, they're going to be mightily oppressed, and they're going to have to stay up in the mountains. They couldn't come down into the Jezreel Valley, as we're going to see, because of the political situation on the ground. Okay? Questions on this? All right. Now, let's talk about the geopolitical kind of deal that was happening during this time. The sea peoples, because of kind of the Bronze Age collapse and everything that's going on in the ancient world, they are going to take over the coastline of Canaan. Up in the north, there's going to be a people called the Shadana, the Shadana. And this is who Sisera was a part of. They're a part of this group of people called the Sardana. They were a sea people. So they weren't native to the land of Canaan. They came from the sea, most likely from the island of Sardinia. Well, how do you know that? Okay, good question. Archaeologists have looked at pottery, and also architectural things, And so there's two places where this pottery is found in a type of architecture as well. One is on the island of Sardinia. The other is in the northern coast of Israel. So there's a connection between these things, between the pottery, how they made their pottery, their design, and how they built their structures as well. There's a correlation between the culture that was living in Sardinia and the sea peoples that came and lived on the coastline of Canaan. All right, now, let's take a look at this place where Sisera lived. I want to make this distinction between the Canaanites and the Sardinians. They were two different groups of people, but they allied themselves together because of the threat that they saw of Israel in the hill country. And so Sisera is not going to live up in Hazor. Okay, Hazor is up north. He's going to live in a totally different area, which is another kind of data point that they were a separate entity. Okay, they lived in their own area, which was south of Hazor. Okay, and the place of their army, Harosheth Hagorim. Okay, and that is translated in the Hebrew, Smitty of the nations. Well, what does a smitty do? Anybody? Ancient world. Oh, I'm a smitty. A blacksmith. Very good, Sister Lee. Yes. A blacksmith. I work with iron. The smitty of the nations. In other words, Israel, okay, they looked at this place, and it was the place where war was prepared, okay, the smitty of the nations. This is where all of these iron weapons were made. This is where all the spears were made. This is where the chariots of iron were made. Okay, and so 900 chariots, thousands and thousands of men are in this area. And so the Canaanites and the Sardinians, of which Sisera was a member, are going to ally themselves together against Israel. And they're going to be very successful, right? It says that they're going to mightily oppress Israel for 20 years. They're not going to allow them to come down into the valleys. The Peleset, who are another group of sea peoples, right? We talked about this. They're going to be the Philistines. But the Philistines aren't going to come all the way north. They're going to stay south. The Amalekites as well. Their history is actually fascinating. I was looking at this last night. There are some historians that say that the Amalekites were also a sea people that came into this area as well. And they're going to be like a group of marauders that are going to attack vulnerable, other people. Did that happen? Yeah, we're told that happened in Exodus. The minute the Israelites got out of Egypt, out of the protection of the Egyptians, what happened? The Amalekites attacked the weakest. Remember that? Okay, and so they were looking for an easy score. All right, let me try to finish this up here. So many of the Canaanites are going to be conquered by the sea peoples, but in some cases, they're not. Like up north, the Canaanites were stronger. Okay, and so I think they probably made a peace with these sea peoples, and they made an alliance against a common enemy, which was Israel. All right? And so they're going to see Israel, this new ethnic group of people that have just come into the land, and they're going to be like, whoa, we've got to do something about this. They've taken all of these cities, they've burnt all these cities with fire, and they're inhabiting all of these villages. We've got a major problem on our hands, right? Okay. And here, this picture right here, you can see, this is a very familiar headdress of the Philistines, right? With these flowers, not flowers, feathers probably most likely. But look at all these guys too. These sea peoples, they have horns. All right? And there's going to be a lot of Egyptian like hieroglyphs of these types of people right here, okay? Particularly with these guys with horns. Which is interesting. These sea peoples, they did have horns. You know who didn't have horns? The Vikings. But we think the Vikings had horns. They didn't have horns. All right, let's take a look at a couple maps here. All right, we are talking about the northern part of Israel. All right, the lower Galilee, up near up near Nazareth, this area, the Galilee, where Jesus first began his ministry. Right. I want you to take a look at this map on the right-hand side. You're right. You have all of this mountainous area. Here's Mount Gilboa, right? Here's Megiddo. Oh, a lot of battles happened in Megiddo in the ancient world, right? What's another name for Megiddo? Armageddon, yes. Okay, so this is the area we're talking about, the Jezreel Valley. Mount Carmel is here. Mount Tabor is here. Mount Moriah is here. Mount Gilboa, Mount Ephraim. So you're ringed around here by different mountains, mountain ranges, hill country. But what's this right here? Ooh, the Jezreel Valley. Beautiful farmland, brothers and sisters. Really nice. Even today, you go to the Jezreel Valley. Oh, I wish, Brother Jason was here. Right? Casey, Rachel, you could tell us all about it. Sad. All right. And so the Jezreel Valley is going to be right here. Here is where Sisera and his army is, right? Haroshet, right here. This is where he is going to encamp, but also where his town is going to be. This is where him and his mercenary army are going to live. Okay, right here in the Jezreel Valley area. Makes perfect sense to have chariots, okay, in this area. Now, if we want to kind of zoom out a little bit, on the left-hand side, you can see here's the Kishon River, which kind of runs through the Jezreel Valley. Again, we're up in the north area. Here's Mount Tabor, all right? And so, what's going to happen? Well, very quickly. Deborah is actually going to be down south near Jerusalem in Ephraim, okay, which is about 30, 40 miles south of Mount Tabor where Barak is, okay? Barak is not going to fight unless Deborah goes with her. So she has to travel up into this area. And she says to bring all of the people, 10,000 people, they're going to gather all of the Israelites. Some of them aren't going to come, by the way. Right? We're told from the Song of Deborah that some of them don't come. They don't come to help their fellow Israelites. So already there's kind of cracks, right, in this alliance. Anyways, they're going to be on Mount Tabor. What's the next one here? Okay, yeah. They're going to be up here. You can see how mountainous and everything it is here, except for the Jezreel Valley. All right, let's stay here. What most likely happened here, brothers and sisters, was there is a pass. In order to get to the Mount Tabor area, there is a pass that you have to go through. It's a relatively narrow pass that you have to go to in order to get to Mount Tabor, into this area. And so what most likely happened was the children of Israel actually kind of drew Sisera's army up into this pass area, okay? Now, if you are in a narrow pass and you have a lot of chariots, are you able to use those chariots effectively if you have to kind of go up a hill pass single file? The answer is no, right? And so on this pass, it's on two sides, okay? There's like a little hill here and there's a little hill here. I meant to get a picture, but I didn't. And so as Sisera's army is going up to this pass, all the Israelites are up here on the hills. And remember, they don't have sophisticated weapons during this time. They may have had a few swords and a few spears. They didn't have sophisticated weapons. Most likely they used slings, okay? And they start firing down these missiles and rocks down on all of these, on Sisera's army. And they can't maneuver because they're in a pass. They can't line up their chariots and wipe out Israel. And so what happens is panic. That's exactly, Brother Steve. They can't turn around. And so what happens is panic sets in. And so now there's chaos. From the account in Deborah as well, it sounds like that there was some type of storm, right? And which caused a lot of the rivers and a lot of the streams to overflow, which also hampered the retreat of Sisera's army, which allowed Barak and the Israelites to come down from the hills and chase these guys. They can't use their chariots. They're getting stuck in the mud. They can't cross any of these streams because there's flash floods. And now they're kind of hemmed in. And this is when Israel is going to completely annihilate the forces of Sisera and the forces of the Canaanites at this time. And that's really going to be the end of Canaanite control up in the north. And so in Judges 4 and 5, we have this massive battle of the Israelites up in the hill country, finally pushing out these sea peoples and pushing out the Canaanites from the Jezreel Valley and from the other areas that were more desirable for agriculture. And it is because of Deborah, and it is because of Barak, that the northern area of Israel is going to be much more successful in kind of taking out a lot of these people. Not all of them, but they're going to become strong up in the north. And they're going to have their own identity. This identity, by the way, brothers and sisters, is going to continue on during the time of the judges. And it's one of the reasons why there's going to be a split, right? Because Israel and Ephraim, particularly the tribe of Ephraim and Manasseh, they're going to look down upon the house of David in a lot of instances. Like, who were these guys? Who were these upstarts from Judah? They're nothing. We're Ephraim. We're Manasseh. Okay? They didn't, and that's why, remember there was a rebellion with Absalom, right, against David, and then with Jeroboam and Rehoboam as well, right after the death of Solomon. It's going to be split into two nations. So anyways, that's a lot of information. That's what I have. Now, last thing. You keep saying last thing. Yes. In the early chapters of Judges, okay, here are all the list of these judges, right? Early chapters of Judges are going to happen up in the north, all right, like from, like up until like Judges 12, okay, around there. But then a lot of the judges are going to be down here, like Judah is now going to be in the forefront. They're going to be fighting against primarily the Philistines and the Amalekites. So it shifts. Our account in Judges and in 1st and 2nd Samuel are going to shift from the north down to the south. Now the tribe of Judah is going to play an active role in subduing the southern area of the Promised Land. And who do they come in contact with? Well, come in contact with the Ammonites, come in contact with the Moabites, they come in contact with the Philistines, they come in contact with the Amalekites as well. And they're going to be continuous wars on there. So I guess what I want you to take out of this lesson is, anyways, Israel was in a very desperate situation because of who was in the land at this time. And so very slowly, Israel is going to get the upper hand in the land of Canaan. But it's going to take them like 200 years, brothers and sisters. Instead of just taking like a year or two, as God promised them, if you obey me, you do what do what I want you to do, you're going to be settled, everything's going to be great. But they never did it. And so instead of like 2 years, let's just say 5 years. Instead of 5 years, we're talking about a 200-year struggle for the control of the Promised Land. And that's what Judges is all about. It wasn't easy. And it wasn't easy is because they made the wrong decisions. They kicked the can down the road. They didn't deal with issues straight away. And God told them, you're going to be these nations are going to be a thorn in your side. They're going to be problematic. And that's exactly what happened.